They say the light never went out, not once. Not in the worst storm, not even when the last man vanished from the tower. It kept turning, kept blinking, kept whispering. That's what locals say. They won't go near the cliff. Not anymore. The lighthouse is older than the town below it. Built in 1861, carved into the black spine of the coast like a single tooth left in a rotting mouth. It doesn't have a name, just coordinates and warning signs. Officially decommissioned, but every few nights, someone sees the light sweep across the waves. Some say it's a glitch, others say it's a lie. But I know the truth, because I found the keeper's journal. It was buried in the rocks beneath the western foundation, wrapped in oilcloth, sealed with wax. The last entry was written on a night with no moon. The ink was shaky, not rush disturbed. It's not the wind, it's the voice. It sings now. There were 3 men assigned to the lighthouse before it shut down. Only one body was ever recovered. The other 2 never found. The door was locked from the inside. The table was set for 3. The tea was still warm. I tell myself, these are stories. That the cliff makes people imagine things. That fog distorts sound and time. But then I visited. The door opened on its own. There were no footprints but mine, and I heard it, low, guttural, echoing through the stone like the bones of the sea grinding against themselves. It didn't speak words. Not at first, just tone. But then, we kept the light. You keep the song. I don't know what that means. Not yet, but something still lives in the tower. Not human, not ghost, not alone. This is not a haunting. It's a pattern. It's a call, and I answered. So now I have to tell you what I found. Not just one lighthouse, not just one story. There are others. Beacons that never stopped. Sirens that use light instead of sound. Towers that should have collapsed decades ago, but still stand. This is not fiction. These are logs, recordings, recovered letters, and they all whisper the same warning. Part 1. Vanished without a trace. There are disappearances we expect, storms, accidents, errors in calculation. Then there are vanishings that leave no room for logic, only silence. December 1900, the Flannan Isles, Scotland. 3 men stationed at the lighthouse: Donald MacArthur, Thomas Marshall, James Duquette. The relief boat arrived after a brutal storm. The light had gone out days before, but when the crew reached the tower, they found no one. The door was locked from the inside. Meals uneaten, coats hanging, clocks stopped. The logbook remained, and that's where it begins. Entries growing stranger with each day, seas rougher than ever seen. Marshall crying, something wrong. Ducat quiet all day. Wind speaks. Then the final entry, storm ended. Sea calm, God is over all. But there was no storm recorded that day. Not by any nearby ship. Not by any coastal watch. Just fog. Dense, soundless, alive. They searched the cliffs, the tunnels, the sea caves. No blood, no scraps, no signs of struggle. Only the echo of something. Missing in 1937, the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse off Oregon experienced something similar. A keeper vanished, simply gone. No boat, no foul weather, just gone between the morning check-in and the noon meal. They found his boots near the lens. Still warm, he had complained of dreams before, of voices in the beams, of light that blinked in patterns he couldn't unsee. One letter he wrote remains archived. It's not the dark that frightens me, it's the beam, I think it's showing. Something trying to remember its way back. In 1954, a lighthouse off Ushant, France, reported strange activity. The log showed one man still alive writing entries days after his colleagues were confirmed dead. His final note: "They don't need doors. They come through the light." This isn't just madness. Not anymore. Multiple disappearances. Same patterns, same phrases. The light stays on. The structure remains intact, but the men inside disappear, and always the same whisper. You keep the song. Part 2. The logs that shouldn't exist there. Something wrong with the records. Some logs weren't meant to be read. They're fragmented, pages out of order, dates that repeat, notes written in the margins by someone who wasn't there, and sometimes entire entries appear between lines, almost translucent, like the lighthouse itself wrote them. Archivists in Nova Scotia uncovered a ledger from 1912. It belonged to Cape Pine Lighthouse. Routine until 1 week, lens distorted. The sea no longer reflects the sun. Woke with sand in my mouth. No beach here. The fog writes symbols on the glass. We cannot clean them. It was unsigned. The signature block just said, "We." Another log came from Godrevy Lighthouse, Cornwall, 1923. The keeper documented birds crashing into the tower for 3 nights straight, hundreds of them. The 4th night, no more birds. Now the stars blink wrong, and then silence. The final pages were soaked, not water. Ink, smeared fingerprints dragged across the margins, and one phrase repeated 37 times. The beam is remembering. How do logs appear years later and sealed? Archives. Why do ink tests fail to identify the age? In 1969, the South Stack Lighthouse in Wales reported missing sections of their logs. When backup files were consulted, those entries had been replaced with poems, stanzas describing voices in stone, children knocking from beneath the lens, a melody no one could hum, but all felt in their teeth. Who wrote them, no one knows, but all the keepers after went deaf in one ear. A classified military report from 1982 details a listening station off Nova Scotia intercepting a beacon pulse not registered to any active lighthouse. They traced the signal to a tower that hadn't been operational since 1945. Inside, they found one thing: a fresh logbook. Every page empty, except the first. Thank you for turning the page. Part 3. Songs through the stone. Before light, there was sound. Lighthouses weren't always built for sight. Some were meant to sing. Foghorns, rotating gears, wind whistling through cracked stone. The sea has always had its own orchestra, but sometimes the songs changed. In 1898, the assistant keeper at Skerryvore Lighthouse in Scotland began complaining of a tone in the walls. Not a hum, not vibration. A note. Constant, low, like a tuning fork struck inside the skull. He wrote, "It isn't carried by wind, it's carried by memory." Over the next 6 days, he transcribed the tone into musical notation, then went blind in one eye, the paper still archived. Music historians claim the pattern doesn't follow Western scales, but it does appear in Mesopotamian funerary songs. Coincidence? In 1934, a keeper at Point Sur Lighthouse in California was caught standing at the top of the tower at 3 a.m., singing into the sea. He had slit his own palms open. When questioned later, he said, it asked for harmony. In 1972, A lighthouse researcher named Emily Groves tried to sonically map a decommissioned beacon in Nova Scotia. The recordings she gathered picked up layered frequencies, some beyond human range. When slowed down, they resembled voices, not English, not anything recorded, but in the pattern, repetition, names, coordinates, a phrase, "We are beneath." Emily Groves disappeared in 1973. Only her tape recorder was found, still playing, still recording. Musicians exposed to the audio for prolonged periods reported phantom sounds and untraceable harmonics in their later compositions. And in every lighthouse where tone phenomena are reported, one thing remains consistent. The song is not random. It builds. It learns. It echoes differently based on who's listening. One ex-keeper described the sound as a lullaby for something sleeping beneath the stone. But it's waking up, and it's learning to sing back. Part 4. The cult below the beacon. There are those who kept the light, and those who worshipped what it touched. Hidden in the history of lighthouse construction are gap-seers with missing reports, unnamed contractors, false budgets. But if you look deeper, patterns emerge. Certain towers were built in places no ships passed, others reinforced long after deactivation. Why? Because some weren't built for sailors. They were built as altars. In 1919, a worker at St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida claimed to have found a sealed chamber beneath the spiral stairs. Inside, bones arranged in concentric spirals. Animal, human, unknown. He reported it. 2 days later, he fell from the top railing. The report vanished in 1986. A former Coast Guard member admitted to investigating strange gatherings beneath the Cape Hatteras lighthouse. They wore no robes. They used no names. They spoke only in humming tones. He said they placed mirrors at the base of the beacon, reflecting the light downward. He asked what they were doing. They answered, letting it in. In the Hebrides, oral legends speak of stonekeepers' figures who arrived before the British Empire, who lived beneath the rocks, and who emerged only when the light was right. One lighthouse plan, recovered from 1857, had notes in the margins, not in English, not in any known language. It wasn't ink. It was etched into the paper. An archaeologist scanned it and found the pattern repeated across multiple sites, globally, in caves, in catacombs, in prehistoric stones, the same spiral. Some believe the cult didn't die. It became bureaucracy. The lighthouse keepers weren't just employees. They were stewards, participants. A Coast Guard memo from 2003 unclassified accidentally refers to psycho-spiritual alignment procedures required in certain stations. When asked for clarification, the department denied the document's existence, but the memo ends with this: ensure harmonic integrity before light rotation. Do not allow disruption between frequencies 13.7 Hz and 14.1 Hz. That's the range for human heartbeat synchronicity. Why would that matter? Unless the light was listening. Part 5. The lighthouse that isn't there anymore. There's one more thing they don't tell you. Some lighthouses don't exist. Not officially, not anymore. But people still see them. A sailor from Reykjavik swears he saw a beacon flash from a cliff that, on satellite maps, shows nothing but grass. A kayaker in Alaska described paddling toward a distant light for hours, only for it to vanish at dawn. When rescuers found him, he was miles inland, drenched, frostbitten, and repeating one sentence: "It was never there, but it called me anyway." In 1995, a French fishing vessel reported navigating by a signal that pulled them through dense fog. When the Coast Guard checked the coordinates, no beacon was registered. The area was declared a radar anomaly. But the crew all reported hearing a voice, low, warm, speaking in their mother tongue. No matter the crew member's nationality, the lighthouse isn't a place. It's a pattern, a convergence of silence, sound, light, and memory. A pulse embedded into the coastlines of the mind, and when enough people remember it, it flickers back into the world. That's the theory. But here's the problem. What happens when it stays? There are confirmed reports of decommissioned towers reappearing in drone footage frames inserted between static, quick flashes of rusted spirals, glass lenses, collapsed doors, images that vanish on REWATCH. In 2018, a Canadian storm chaser found a photo on his phone of a tower he never visited. The timestamp placed him in the middle of a forest, but in the picture, cliffs, fog, and a tower with a dark spiral carved around its core. No entrance, no windows, just the light, and the light was on. They say the tower is like a siren returning when forgotten, just enough to be dangerous. One last logbook was recovered by hikers in Ireland in 2021, found inside a rusted box in the dirt. No lighthouse. Nearby, inside, only one page was legible. It's not lost, it's waiting to be needed. And when the hikers returned 2 days later, the box was gone. But in its place, a flashlight, still warm. Some beacons don't guide ships, they guide thoughts, and when thoughts become many, the door opens again.